Hmm. Peter,
Hey, George.
I think we should be on the live. I mean, do you see yourself live?
Meeting is now streaming live on YouTube, it says.
Okay. So so we should be live,
As it says.
as it says. That's very good. Um,
And if it's written down, it must be true.
indeed it must. Indeed it must. All right. So, how are you, Peter?
Very well. The weather is turning, and the days are getting shorter. It is dark out.
It is
You and I lament this about winter.
very much so. I mean, that really is the the saddest part of winter is the shortness of these days.
It's not the cold. It's not the cold, and it's not the snow. It's the shortness of the day, the lack of sunlight.
That's right. And it's like even now when we start, I have to turn the light on because I know that in about 15, 20 minutes it's going to start getting really dark, and then I'm going to be sitting in a dark room.
The only upside is it tells you, oh, you can have a drink.
It is true. Because ultimately you have to think about what are the upsides of winter. There are very few upsides. I mean, I guess some people who like winter sports. I've never done winter sports, but some people look at that. But other than drinking, I don't know what other upsides there are.
I would have to think long and hard on that one. I think that's the only one that comes to mind with me.
Right. No, but because people say, oh yeah, well I like to go skiing or whatever. And so yeah, but what about
People don't ski at night usually, but anyway.
Yes, quite. So yeah. All right. So we are already, Jeannie, how are you? So I saw today there was a little story in the Moscow Times, which I don't normally read, that there was a royal wedding in St. Petersburg, which is a descendant, quite a long descendant. I mean,
and distant.
Very distant, yeah, of Nicholas II, who got married in an Orthodox church in St. Petersburg. And apparently, at least the story I read, Zaharova attended, or at least I wasn't sure where she attended. She was invited, so I don't know whether she actually attended. So I thought that was kind of amusing because, I mean, the Bolsheviks really showed their savagery very early on. I mean, they butchered that family. I mean, they butchered the children, they butchered all the women, the servants, everybody.
Dog.
Yeah, everybody. Yeah, this was, there was no trial or anything. I mean, they just butchered them, and they didn't hesitate. Killing children, anything like that. Boom. So they kind of they really showed their colors very early on with that terrific.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because I've had this conversation off and on over the years, and I've always been kind of fascinated with the. To what degree people have an attachment to the former royal family that was summarily murdered by the Bolsheviks.
Right.
And there's not a particularly strong one, though there is from a branding point of view, from a marketing point of view, late imperial Russia is actually quite popular for like chocolates and perfumes.
Yep.
If you go to the GUM, the department store, they really love the late imperial motif, which I actually really like too.
Right.
But if you have a conversation about what kind of reverence you have for the royal family, and the odd thing comes up every single time, George. But there was a revolution for a reason.
Right. Yeah.
And so it kind of goes back and forth there. I mean, the regalia, I think most of us are kind of impressed with that. I mean, considering we have glass and cement these days.
Right.
But no, this story, I didn't even know the Moscow Times is in business anymore, even though when it was, I was published there quite a few times with many years ago. But yeah, it's an oddity. It's one of those things, on the 10th page of the paper in the corner,
Right, right.
like by the way story. Okay,
Right.
because none of these people are Russians; they're foreigners.
That's right. He was one of that, exactly. It's a kind of an interesting thing also with royalty is that once you get rid of them, no one ever seems to want them back. I mean, the same thing happened in Greece. After the overthrow of the Greek monarchy, France. I mean, they never wanted the French, they want the Bourbons back. The Orientals back. I mean, they don't want them back. And I kind of feel, I mean, yes, they will talk about the British royal family, and that's always sacrosanct, and they're probably here to stay. But I wonder what would happen if, I don't know, one of Charles or whoever stepped down, and then the monarchy was dissolved. How great would the feeling be? Well, we have to restore the monarchy. Or people say, good, gone. We don't need this anymore. I mean, look, if people like it, if people think that the monarchy provides them with stability and continuity, fine. But it looks like people can survive quite well without monarchy.
Well, I had a very, very good English friend when I lived in Poland many eons ago. And he was as left wing as you could get. I mean, really out there. Right. And an admirer of Trotsky and stuff like that. And I'm dead set against abolishing the monarchy. And it was kind of surprising. He said, it creates a lot of jobs. Why put people out of work? Right, right. That's kind of an interesting practical way of looking at it.
Well, it is a practical, and I think that the tourist aspect of it is also a definite issue, because Britain makes a lot of money off tourism, and the tourists love all of the royal paraphernalia. I mean, they all go to the Buckingham Palace, they all watch the changing of the guard, and everyone is very, very impressed with all of that. So it's a big money maker for Britain.
The world is anticipating Netflix's newest season of The Crown, and I watched the whole thing. It was, it's bubblegum pop culture, okay? Right, but I mean, people are just, I can remember, I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, but when was was it Harry was the last royal big wedding?
I guess it must be, yes.
Okay,
yes,
or the most recent, or the one before.
Harry is the last one, yeah.
Well, anyway, there was a royal wedding, and I was working at RT, and I wasn't part of the editorial decision of what they were going to broadcast. I'm in the programs department. I'm not in the news division. But apparently, they decided, well, should we run it, not run it, because I guess it was like AP or somebody had the live feed, and, we could buy it, and so, of course, I'm just a gadfly. I'm in the programs department, and decided not to run it. So people went into the prep room and put on like BBC, and all the girls were watching the
Yeah. Well, look, I was living in London at the time of the really big wedding, which was Charles and Diana. And that was a huge event. And it was very interesting because it really somehow captured the imagination. I mean, she was, very pretty. She was then also very young, but she was very pretty. And people really were entranced by it. And whatever else one can say about Diana, I mean, Diana really did her job very well. I mean, as that all of those ceremonial things that you're supposed to do, she always did them, and she did them with a lot of grace and charm, and very dutiful. And not all of the royals like doing all of those things. They often are very solid. What?
Would you?
I wouldn't. No, absolutely not. But I mean, for instance, the current Catherine, who's married to William, she's also very good at all of those ceremonial things. Imagine doing this day after day, and you have to smile, and you have to pretend to be interested in everything that people are saying. It's a real skill. And Harry and Meghan didn't have that, and that's it. Yeah.
Those two names are foreboding on the gaggle. All right, everyone, because I don't want to waste my time talking about people like that. The most famous, richest victims in the world.
Yes, exactly. The richest.
You know what? I don't want to belabor this point, but I want to say one thing about Diana. And I'm not interested in all of the gossip and all of the thing. I'm not interested in that. There was the wedding. And then before her death, there was one story that I remember, and I think I remember for good reason. It was during the height of the AIDS epidemic.
Mhm.
And there was a lot of lack of knowledge, and there was fear. And she visited young people that had contracted the virus.
Yep.
And she showed the world media and the British public, she was not afraid, and she would hug, she would touch, and it was like, oh my goodness. And you know what? She was a leader. She showed, look, don't let our fears get the best of us, okay?
Right.
And
I agree.
Graceful, very graceful.
That was very stirring, and that again that captured the world's imagination, because that wasn't just the imagination of the British people. I mean, they captured the world's imagination, and she did become she became a world superstar. I mean, it's like the first time the royal family had ever become something on the world stage, because up until then, I mean, Prince Philip had, people had mixed feelings about him. I mean, he was a kind of a curmudgeon, but actually very clever and amusing. He was, so he would often, maybe say something stupid, but he often said also something quite very clever and funny. But he wasn't a figure on the world stage. I mean, she was really, Americans were crazy about her. And somebody asks, do I think it was an accident? Well, I haven't seen any evidence that it wasn't. And, so I can't really say that, that there was anything suspicious about it. So, I don't know. It's, there's, one would say, she was an embarrassment to the royal family. On the other hand, bumping her off doesn't seem like good business. So, I'm skeptical. I'm always open to conspiracies, but I need some evidence to go by.
But one thing is for sure, her death and the way she died didn't endear any public anywhere in the world to the royal family.
No, so, not at all. Not at all. No, that was quite shocking. I mean, because that was suddenly there was real hostility towards the Queen, which never happened. People had always revered her, and suddenly she was booed, and it was a real hostility, and that's why legend has it that Tony Blair kind of told her, he went to see her and said, you've got to do something now, because there's a real Republican feeling suddenly stirring in the country. And so the Queen had to make an address to the nation, telling them how sorry she was and how much Diana meant to her. So, she had to, that was a crisis for the royal family.
Yeah, what's interesting, George, is that so much of so many cultural icons are invented, they're manufactured for us. And every once in a while, somebody slips through that's the real thing. And, and I think that's why she captured the imagination of so many people in the world, because all of the pomp, it wasn't the pomp and circumstance, because they already had it. Okay. Somebody just came in and just kind of mixed up everything. And she's well thought of in posterity, and that's just fine with me. Will I watch the next season? Probably, because everybody in the office is talking about it. So if you can't fight them, join them.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's that's a very good point. I think there was also sympathy for her, because it did look like she was the wrong woman. I mean, because Charles started seeing, his old girlfriend fairly soon after the wedding, this Camilla Parker Bowles. So, I mean, for most of the world, we said, is there something wrong with your brain? I mean, you've got this beautiful wife, and you're seeing this frumpy woman, but hey, it takes all sorts. But so I think she was there, and. And even now, what we've now found out, that interview that she gave, which was a real disaster to that guy, I've forgotten his name, that Indian guy was at MSNBC, and then he was at BBC, his name escapes me. You remember that guy? I forgot. He had, because he also did a Michael Jackson. Bashir, that's it, Martin Bashir, exactly. But he tricked her into giving that interview, and that is a big scandal. I mean, in other words, he actually tricked her into thinking that the royal family, they were spying on her, and so she just lashed out. But so basically, that was a disastrous interview both for her and for the royal family. But basically, she did it under false pretenses. He actually lied to her and forged documents to suggest that somehow, she was being spied on by the royal family.
What do you expect from establishment media?
Exactly. So that was there was one question from Dale Owens. How would you explain, I mean, this is already going off the topic, but how would you explain the anti-Serbian sentiment in the Western media? Remember the criticism of Peter Handke when he defended Serbia in the 1990s? Well, that's a very good question. And it's, I think it's obviously, there are many aspects to it. I mean, I think the most important aspect of it, I think back in the 90s, was that Serbia was seen to be a friend of Russia, and the geopolitical consensus at the time was to, let's just push, this is a historic opportunity to push Russia right out of Europe, and therefore, we basically got to do something about Serbia, because that's always been Russia's little brother. And I think also Milosevic himself was seen as a kind of the last communist holdout, and that he wasn't, of course, but he was seen as someone, who was a communist and was winning elections. So he had a certain popularity. And again, in that craze of the early 90s of, hey, end of history, the end of communism, and so on, the fact that here was somebody who was a communist, former communist, winning election, I think caused a great deal of aggravation. And I think that I think it contributed to that anti-Serb feeling, because it doesn't exist anymore. I mean, that once that whole political crisis is over, there are people who remember the 90s, but younger people don't have any of that hysterical hatred of the Serbs that existed back then. What do you think, Peter?
I think also is that there was this feeling of invincibility, that you can change reality at a whim, right, because it was very much the unipolar moment,
right? Very much so.
And it was almost, it was not only was it an attempt to push Russia out of Europe, but it was to do it in the most spiteful way.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you're down on your knees, and what we're going to do? We're going to kick you in the teeth.
That's it. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. There was a very much that. Yeah.
And there's always this, one of the things that I think is underestimated, and I think that I know we've talked about it before. There's also this cultural element to it. I mean, looking at these Eastern Slavs, they're backwards, they're primitive. Absolutely. They need to be taught, and they have to be led. I mean, it really astounds me when you think of the literature and the physicists, the mathematicians,
right.
and the poetry and the classical music. I mean, what in the world do you think you have on these people? Really?
It really is. It's an extraordinary arrogance, like the term the Balkans, it's always been, the Balkans, they're just a bunch of bandits and cutthroats and nothing else to them. And so, exactly, when you talk about, the literature, the history, architecture, everything, all of that is just forgotten in this, almost a kind of a racist characterization, which was acceptable. It is always acceptable against Russians and Serbs to talk about them as almost like they're subhuman. I mean, and back in the 90s, that was quite a common way of referring to the Serbs, as almost in like Hitler-like terms that, these are just Slavs, they're just, they're subhuman. They're just not on our level. And I think that was the point that Peter Handke was making. Handke was saying, hey, I'm living here in Austria and I travel through Germany, and the way people are talking about the Serbs, that's exactly the way they talked about them in the Hitler days. I mean, it hasn't changed at all.
Also, when, like Balkanization, the Balkans and all of that, I mean, that, there's the whole issue of agencies that at play here. I mean, where did we really actually come up with that is the onslaught against the Ottoman Empire, okay? Right. And then you have the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Russian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, and lo and behold, everybody, the Balkans was the playground, okay? Yeah. So, I mean, not only are these people been victimized, they're repeatedly victimized. George and I did a video a few days ago. That's right. It continues to go on.
That's right. Yeah.
Because the Serbs are still somehow barbaric.
That's it.
When they want to fight for their own self-determination.
Yes.
But the Kosovars, they were the first, the Kurds, okay?
Exactly. Exactly. And they was completely invented. Like the Kosovars, as if there's something.
And they're from Albania, for God's sake.
Exactly.
They're from Albania.
That's right. And same with the invention of the Bosniaks. They were Muslim. They were Muslim Slavs. They were Muslim because their ancestors had converted to Islam under Turkish occupation, which of course, has fueled subsequent resentment. You were the people who converted. And why did you convert? Well, so that you could be the ruling top dog. That's what people never really understood, that it was a kind of a class element in this, because the Muslims of Bosnia were seen as the ruling elites, because they had converted and had been the ruling elite in Ottoman times. So people always think of poor Muslims who they're discriminated against and treated terribly. But no, as far as the people in Bosnia were concerned, they were the victims of the Muslims. They remembered the times of the Ottomans, and they also remember the fact that Muslims were on Hitler's side in World War II, which has also played an important role in what happened in the 90s, as were the Croats on Hitler's side. So, all of that shaped, what was going on in the 90s.
Yes, and I could remember it like it was yesterday, George. Remember when Germany, out of the blue, bolted out of the barn and recognized Croatia? It's like, aren't you the last country in Europe?
Exactly. That's it. Yeah.
The last.
Exactly.
I mean, considering all of the continuity and stability of German foreign policy, and I think George and I would agree in the main, absolutely. That's why that decision was so astounding.
Yes.
And it had a knock-on effect, and a very negative one at that.
Right.
One of the worst diplomatic decisions made in modern history.
It was horrific.
And it turned into a cascade of events that could not control.
It was quite horrific. Keep in mind also, this was only a few months after German reunification. So the point about German reunification was Helmut Kohl and Genscher made a promise to the world. Henceforth, there'll be no more unilateral German moves. Henceforth, there'll be no more aggression from Germany. Henceforth, Germany will always respect international law. And then they go and do this. And not only did they do this, they bullied the rest of the European Union into going along with it, because the rest of the Europeans, they thought, what the hell is going on here? We were supposed to have a united front, which is we don't recognize unilateral secession. And then Germany went and did this, and then started coercing everybody else into recognizing.
And henceforth, Margaret Thatcher was aghast by this. Right. And she made it very clear, German revisionism. I mean, for a lot of people say, come on, this is going a little bit too far here. Right. But you're right. They said no more unilateral acts on the part of Germany. And then this happens. And then, within a few months, you break your word.
That's it.
After everyone, everyone's crying everybody wants a piece of the wall as a souvenir. It's over. End of history and all that. And all of a sudden, history comes back at you in a hard and fast way.
That's right. It was shocking because he broke the United Front in Europe, and the United Nations Secretary General Perez de Cuellar at the time was pleading, don't recognize Croatia and Slovenia, because then everything's just going to go up. It would explode because then was Bosnia, and then because Bosnia was so divided among the three nations that once they go for independence, then war is inevitable. And Germany went ahead and did this, and there was a kind of an extraordinary thing. That's So we have a question here from Balázs Hetinyi. And he asks here, what happened in Srebrenica? Now, that's a very long and complicated story. What one can say is that, that there had been a fight between the Serbs and the Muslims for control in Srebrenica. So basically, the Muslims had taken control of it. They had driven out the Serbs. So, in 95, it was under Muslim control. The problem was that this was a kind of an enclave in which the Muslim armed forces were in Srebrenica, and they were launching attacks from Srebrenica against the local Serb villages. So while the war was going on, throughout Bosnia, the Serbs said, this is a big distraction for us because we keep having to send forces here to deal with Srebrenica while the big fight is going on for Sarajevo. So they decided that the only way they can get out of this is to end these enclaves, the Srebrenica enclave and the Žepa enclave. What then happened is, of course, a kind of a mystery, because basically the Muslims, now whether under American encouragement or whatever, they left Srebrenica undefended, and the Muslim forces simply retreated in broad daylight. So the Serbs enter Srebrenica. It was completely undefended. In the meantime, the Muslim forces were making their retreat. Well, they were making their retreat across Serbian front lines. So many of them were killed during this retreat. Now, there obviously were some executions that took place, but most of the casualties that took place in Srebrenica was as a result of the Muslim retreat from Srebrenica when they were trying to get to Tuzla. Well, you're not under any obligation to basically not shoot at a retreating army. A retreating army is still a legitimate military target. So while there probably were executions, the bulk of the casualties was as a result of the Muslim army retreating from Srebrenica to Tuzla. But they've always come up with this number, this 8,000 executions. They've never even remotely been able to establish anything like that the case, because the numbers never really added up, and the body count never added up. But nonetheless, it's just enshrined that 8,000 Muslim men and boys were executed.
No, but what it is it took. Obviously, what happened there was awful. George, war is awful. Okay,
war is awful. Yeah. Yep.
And what the West did is that they tried to they did successfully take it out of context, and they turned it into a genocide.
Exactly.
Okay,
yep.
And as if it was something in isolation, and very shameful. I think in our internet world, that something like that's good. It's really hard to pull the wool over people's eyes now, because there's so many other people looking.
Yeah, that's right.
There's only one standard official rendition of what happened there, and it just kind of floats in the air. It's really kind of fact free. Were people killed? Yes. Were people executed? Yes. Were people tortured? Yes. Because it's called war. Okay.
Exactly. That's it. You're absolutely right. I mean, that's what always happens, is the things that's somehow taken out of context. And then, and then she says, oh my God, Srebrenica, genocide. Oh, the shelling of Sarajevo. Yeah, but there was a war that was going on. Why was Sarajevo being shelled? Well, because the Muslim armed forces were based in Sarajevo, and they were surrounded by Serb armed forces. Hence, but if you say, well, Sarajevo was being shelled, it looks like some peaceful town. Yeah. People going out to eat at the restaurant, and the savage Serbs are just sort of shelling them. But that's not what happened. But that's what happens, when you essentially take things out of context and present it in the media, and then you keep drumming the same story into people's heads. Oh, okay, well, there's a genocide. Oh, genocide.
And what that does is it casts this narrative in a very ethnic one, is that Serbs did this. Henceforth, they committed genocide. Henceforth, they are they're not worthy of any kind of respect as human being. And that's stuck to this day.
It's stuck to this day, and we even did a podcast on this with that Office of the High Representative, who made it into a crime. And so he just sort of inserted into the Republika Srpska criminal code that denial of genocide in Srebrenica will henceforth be a crime in which punishable by prison. I mean, it is so absurd that, in other words, that you're criminalizing proper historical inquiry, which is what you're supposed to do. What actually happened in Srebrenica. But no, we don't want any historical inquiry. We just want to punish people who say the wrong thing.
Yeah, partisans and Western media, they seem to believe that they have the right to label things. There's no investigation that has been done that would say, indeed, this was genocide. Indeed, no. I mean, you can get someone that, well, I was a witness and that's what it was. Well, according to this person, I was a witness. Okay.
Right.
But that's not good enough for us here. Okay. Right. And George and I, we like history a lot.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's right.
And George is a very well-known expert on the forceful breakup of Yugoslavia. So what I'm saying is that just don't read the New York Times or the Guardian. That's not good enough.
No. But that's it. But if we go back to the 1990s, I mean, it is true that this was before the advent of the internet, and you could just get away with a hell of a lot more. I mean, it's you still, people still read the New York Times, the Washington Post, and listened to the BBC, or the Guardian, and I think, well, if they all say this is what happened, then this is what must have happened.
Okay, a good example, everyone. Okay, I moved to Russia in 1998. Yes, indeed, there was the internet, but not the way the internet is today. Okay, I mean, in 1998, it was still in its infancy, or it was a toddler. We can put it that way. Why do you think I started doing what I did? Because I would read the New York Times, I would read the Guardian, the Financial, and then and these stories about Russia, and I'd say, I live here. This is not true.
That's right. Yeah.
This is not, and that is the impetus for everything I have done ever since. And that was way before I worked at RT. And and to this day and I take great pride in it, because I can see through all of these ridiculous narratives. See, all these narratives about Russia have never have anything to do with Russia. It's about their own ideological perspective.
Yes.
That's what it's always about.
Yes.
It's always about themselves.
That's it.
Not about the people they're writing about.
That's it. Yeah. No, absolutely. And that is very much the case to this day. You read in New York Times on the Russian election. What is it all about? Navalny. It is all about Navalny. I mean, well, not you think, well, there's somehow a lot going on. No, they don't feel there's any obligation to inform the American public about who are the political figures in Russia, what are the issues in the election. No. Navalny, because that they've invented a reality.
That would be like, for example, that would be like a foreign correspondent based in Washington. I don't know how many times Lyndon LaRouche ran for president, okay? But let's say it was in 1980. And so you report back, to your domestic population, you're looking at Jimmy Carter versus Ronald Reagan. But the real story is Lyndon LaRouche, okay? Lyndon, he was here at this rally and he talked to this person here and he raised this amount of money. All of these stories about Lyndon LaRouche, okay? Lyndon LaRouche, yeah, he probably ran, but it didn't make any difference. Okay.
Oh, that's right. And in a way, it's a little like what the Soviet coverage, because the Soviet coverage was sort of, they would go on about Gus Hall, who was the leader of the American Communist Party, and they would, what was Gus Hall doing? What was Gus Hall saying? But that was pretty much, that's how they focused. So that was, though actually they were better than the New York Times, because they did actually cover the main candidates. And even though, they were obviously firmly in the camp of Gus Hall, but they actually covered, Ford versus Carter, or Nixon McGovern. They covered it, but here you just don't cover it. I mean, people just have no idea. They have no idea about about the Russian communists. Have no idea about Zhirinovsky. None of that.
Because it's a pseudo democracy. It's not a real democracy. Yeah. And it's a dictatorship. And then the results, the Putin party lost votes in the parliament. Right. Okay, how do you get those two in the same paragraph? I have no idea. But these people don't seem to have any self-awareness whatsoever.
That's right. By the way, as Balázs Hetényi, whose question we're addressing, has said, "Great work, Peter. I really like your work." And crosstalk, and somebody else says, James says, crosstalk is brilliant. So
thank you very much. And I always like to hear that. Unfortunately, YouTube doesn't like me.
That's right.
They've decimated me. I mean, they're just, I don't even look at the numbers anymore, okay? When I would get 80,000, 90,000 hits for a program and there'd be 500 comments, and then I get 6,000 hits and I still get like 500 comments. So, I mean, they can't, the way the ratios work, they're not even embarrassed. They're not even embarrassed.
Right, right. So, Peter, can you update us on what's going on with RT and YouTube?
I have no idea. I have not been in contact with anyone on that. And even if there were news, I would have to defer to our external communications.
Okay. Right.
I'm not suited to speak for RT on this issue.
Okay. All right. Yeah. No. It's interesting again that you get all those people like or people on Fox News like Laura Ingraham, they go, YouTube censoring conservatives, Google censoring conservatives, everyone is censoring conservatives. But, much of that is true. But it would be nice if you actually acknowledge that this censorship goes across the board. It's not just conservatives who are being censored. There's plenty of people who are not conservative. RT is censored. RT is censored more, incidentally, than conservatives. But people like Ingram only have they have this narrow focus. Only people when it's people like her that are being censored. That's all she cares about.
What's really going on here is they're using the pandemic as a cover to go after their enemies, their rivals in media. As far as I know, again, I'm not going to speak with any kind of authority, but RT Germany, RT Deutsch, and apparently there is an affiliated channel that RT.
Yeah, that's it. Something like Phelan, something like.
Yeah. You know what? But their greatest crime is they're popular. They're popular. Yeah. And that's what really irritates the authorities, okay? And I think they're using the whole issue of COVID is a cudgel to go, this is a perfect one, okay? Because they believe in this theory and that theory and this information, this disinformation, and it's just it's an opportunity to go after people, okay? Yeah. That's how I look at it. RT is always in their sights, okay? They don't like us. They've made it very, very clear.
Yeah.
And this is their opportunity. So.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think you're right.
I don't think it has anything to do with the substance of their claim. I don't believe that, okay? Right. Because you can watch, CNN, MSNBC, BBC, all of it, and they're going to give you a different story. There's nothing particularly different from what other foreign stations are saying about this, okay, at all.
Right. But I think you're right. I mean, the COVID thing has enabled the censorship, because now they say, hey, before that, remember, after the 2016 election, there was a lot of censorship, but then it was justified because these are all Russian bots. We were, wiping out all sorts of, pages on Facebook, Twitter accounts and so on, because they were all essentially Russian bots. We basically had to take their word for it. That's just what, and they just simply said, okay, they were working for the Russian government. There's no evidence presented. But now they've changed their position. Now it's all disinformation about COVID. But of course, who are you to say what the truth is? I mean, are you a scientist? Are you a doctor? Are you a virologist? Who are you to say what's disinformation and what isn't disinformation? But that's it. But it now justifies it. Oh, well, we're doing it for public health. We got to keep the public informed.
Well, what about mental health? Right. For 5 years and going, they allowed this Russian gate hoax to be perpetrated. Right. Why aren't their pages being taken out? Why aren't they being deleted? Right. Okay. Yeah. Because what they did for 5 years was evidence free. Okay. Right. No consequences. Right. And on top of it, everyone, look at your feed and on your YouTube account. They keep sending you the junk they want you to watch. Right. Why should I believe? I mean, they propagated a conspiracy against Trump and his orbit for 5 years, and I'm supposed to trust these people?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And nobody has been deplatformed on Twitter for perpetrating the Russiagate hoax. I mean, this went on year in, year out. and there's absolute nonsense. And no one has paid any kind of price at all. And so now for Twitter and Facebook, who were quite happy to go along with this nonsense, they are going to pose as the arbiters of truth. They're going to say, well, this is, but in any case, even if you talk about public health, it's such a fraud. I mean, people talk absolute nonsense about health, but they don't get deplatformed. I mean, people say, oh, if you eat oranges and grapefruits, you're not going to get cancer. I mean, there's no scientific basis for that, but people just talk all sorts of nonsense. If you exercise 3 times a day, you'll live to 100. It's nonsense. No scientific basis. But people are allowed to talk nonsense. I mean, it's not a crime. You don't get censored just because you talk nonsense.
That's the downside of freedom of speech, George.
Right.
You hear a lot of nonsense.
You talk nonsense. But we have to public health. You're absolutely right. This was an excuse to enact the kind of censorship that these internet giants have been longing to implement for years, and particularly under pressure from the Democrats and the mainstream media. I mean, they just caved. I mean, it started, I think, probably with the Democrats immediately after 2016, but then the mainstream media went after them, and they just caved. They said, okay, we'll do as you say. We'll just take people off our platforms.
Okay, but the people that the authorities demonize the most. It's kind of interesting. I've thought about this a lot because of the gaggle. And is it, if you had established yourself online, let's say like 2014, 2015, and you developed a pretty good following, it's a little harder to push you off. But now they look at people that are getting just above the horizon, and that's when they go in to nip it in the bud. Okay, and that they're very much. And again, I want to stress everyone is that when you look at, let's just use YouTube as an example. What is the percentage of YouTube that is travel, cats, puppies, cooking, travel?
Right.
It's huge.
Right.
Okay. Now let's go to the other end of the spectrum, political commentary. It's extremely limited. It's very, very limited, and it's very easy to watch those people. I mean, if we had some kind of like tourism conspiracy, that would be a big job to cover, okay?
Right.
But when you get down to geopolitics or the niches that George and I cover, they have individuals that can monitor and make decisions themselves. Of course, we have to worry. All of us have to worry about the algorithm, but it's not as if we are so, people like ourselves are so ubiquitous. We're not. We're actually quite a small number of people.
Right.
There's a very limited number of people, to be honest with you, that I watch on YouTube.
Yeah, I agree. And in fact, I mean, what we talk about is quite sui generis. I mean, we basically, if you look at Glenn Greenwald, we're both admirers of Glenn Greenwald. We've often talked about him, but his focus is pretty narrow. And although he's on Fox News now, a kind of ubiquitous presence on Fox News, his focus is often just basically media freedom, censorship, and so on. But when we talk about geopolitics, and Russia, the Balkans, great power conflicts with China, there's actually quite narrow. There's not many people who are doing what we do. That's we're not saying that we're brilliant or whatever, but the fact is that what we do is actually quite sui generis.
What we do, everyone, and I hope I'm not getting too minute here, but when Douglas McGregor was on with Laura Logan, I think it was Laura Ingram, and he got the first question, his answer as usual, brilliant, okay, and then Laura Logan going on, and he just raises his eyes.
Yeah, that's right. He rolled his eyes.
Everybody, look at that gesture, and that's me and George. Okay, that would be us on Fox. Okay, not even CNN and MSNBC. That's how we would react on Fox.
Yeah, that's right. But it was a classic because it's very rare to get somebody who's doing that, because when we have this, like you have the faces, and it's very rare to get a facial expression like that. He just rolled his eyes as she started ranting. But what's interesting, of course, is that segment just ended 10 seconds later. Boom. So, and Lara Logan, she's there. She's now there all the time. I mean, every day.
She's the Afghan go-to person and border go-to person.
That's right. Much of the time, I have to say, I don't even understand what she's saying.
I don't either.
She's just ranting and raving, and I don't quite follow where is this going. I mean, if you talk about Afghanistan, what is she saying? We need to go back in? Because saying, oh, everyone is saying there's nothing we can do. What do you mean there's nothing we can do? Yeah.
The fight continues.
That fight continues,
The legitimate president of Afghanistan is fighting still, okay? And so, you know, my whole thing, and I've talked about this for so long, and you know, George, what pains me is that war went on for 20 years. I mean, the American participation in it.
Right.
And it only has gotten coverage in the last 7 weeks. Okay.
Right.
It wasn't happening. Okay. Right. And so, you know, again, you know, it's if the media is jumping into a media war that has not been covered at all. Okay. I mean, if you look at antiwar.com, I mean, they covered this, you know, every minutia of it. I mean, I don't know, there's a section of people notice, but, you know, soldiers coming home or soldiers that have died. They did that for 20 years. Yeah. Okay. And did anybody in the mainstream do it? No, no one. Okay. Right. So, I mean, Laura Logan wants us to fight for child literacy. That's, you know, and you know what? Fighting for child literacy is for NGOs to do, and maybe she should go.
Well, that's it. That's exactly what, yeah, exactly. If you want to, you know, anyone who says, hey, you know, we need to fight, then, you know, you say, no one is stopping you. Get, you know, put on a backpack, you know, get a gun, you know, get some books, literacy books and whatever. No one's stopping you going off to Afghanistan now. Don't start urging a country to basically lose, you know, its young people's lives in fighting stupid wars.
At the risk of getting myself into a huge amount of hot water, I want to say something here. The whole topic of Afghanistan, which I don't think has really any real political traction, and we can talk about that. I agree. At all. 40 days behind enemy line, all this, I think it's nonsense, okay? But at the risk of getting myself in a lot of trouble, they lied to us for 20 years about that war. Right. Now, what they say about the Taliban now, just take it with a grain of salt, okay? George and I, they're nasty people. We have said this.
Right.
Okay, very nasty. However, don't use the fact that they're very nasty to try to control the way you think of how we should act and react, okay? Don't play their game. And if I want to know what's going on with the Taliban, go to the Moon of Alabama, go to antiwar.com and other Middle East sites that George and I read all of the time. What I'm just saying, try to get a nuanced understanding of what's going on and just don't take the barbarians and all. Right. You know who was barbaric for 20 years? America and its allies were barbaric in Afghanistan.
Well, I think that's right. I mean, I think that you're right. There were 20 years. No one paid any attention to that war. In other words, you basically had 20 years to do whatever you wanted to do. I mean, that's a long time. I mean, you were given basically a free ride for 20 years. No one interfered, no one criticized, and now you say, oh no, we want another 10 years, another 15 years. But this is, all of this is complete nonsense. Why should you think that the next 10 years are going to be any better than the last 20? I mean, you don't have a business plan. As I said,
it's even simpler than that. It's like an alcoholic saying, I want to quit. I really want to quit. I just need 10 more years. I think I can quit.
Yeah. So now, there's no question that it was carried out. The exit was carried out in a completely disastrous fashion. It was a horrific exit. But ultimately, no one wants to go back in. And so when Hannity starts his show with, what was it, 40 days since the, 40 years, he said all these Americans are behind enemy lines. He has no idea who these people are. when he says Americans, for all he knows, these are people who basically, they got citizenship, but they're Afghans. They're living in Afghanistan. They didn't want to leave. I mean, so to say, well, Afghans are all, enemies. They had the chance to leave. They didn't want to leave. So I mean, America was just handing out these passports in the usual kind of haphazard way all these years. Those are the people. So, the way Hannity, it sounds like, we got some, Mick O'Rourke from, Tucson, Oklahoma, stuck there. I want to come back. I want to come back. There's no evidence for any of that.
They have not identified the type of people. I think George is absolutely right. There may be Afghan spouses, for example, or people. 20 years is a long time, folks. If you were polishing the floors in that vast embassy, they have Abdul, you've been here for 10 years. You want, on a special visa, you want a green card, stuff like that. Okay. I'm not trying, George and I don't know because nobody is told us. It is just another cudgel that's being swung around all of the time.
Right.
Okay. And so until we have much more clarity, because they don't want to give us clarity, people like that don't want this to die. Okay.
Right, that's right.
And I'm absolutely convinced, everyone, it has zero political traction. Right. Nobody's going to the polls on this issue. Right. You know why? You know why, George? Because they lied to us for 20 years about it. Okay. And then you get these horrific pictures. Okay. We have plenty of horrific pictures on all kinds of things right now. So, I'm just exhausted by it. And again, they lied to you for 20 years, the sin of omission. Why do you want to believe them now? Don't.
Yeah, that's right. And it is striking that when Hannity does this, the Americans behind enemy lines, he hasn't come up with a name. Can you give us a couple of names, of these Americans who are stuck there in Kabul or wherever in the mountains, and they want to come back to the United States? Give us a name. Give us a couple of names.
You would think that's knowable.
Yes. So I would have
that poor little girl that was presumably killed by her boyfriend, that, national coverage. Okay. So, right. I mean, if you have a loved one stuck in Afghanistan, why aren't you calling Fox News? I'm sure.
That's it. Exactly. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. This is, my husband wants to come back. And he's being prevented from doing so. So he can't, all this time, Hannity still has yet to come up with a name and a photograph of somebody who wants to come back, and he's being prevented from doing so. So we have Herman Montoya says, thoughts about Tulsi Gabbard support of drone strikes in Africa and the Middle East. Yeah, she also wants special forces on the ground. She sounded like a neocon. I mean, I think her problem is she really doesn't like the jihadis, and I think that's I think there's some sympathy for that. She thinks that these jihadis are bad news.
They are.
But drone strikes, they're kind of problematic. I mean, as we've shown, these deadly accuracy of drone strikes, they are not deadly accurate. I mean, they're just deadly. So I don't see the great, any great advantage to drone striking jihadis.
I'm glad this was noted, because this is so mysterious to me. I have no idea what is going on. She was on, I think it was with Tucker, and that was a door stopper. I had no idea what she was trying to say.
Right.
It was completely at variance to what she has said before. She didn't answer the question. It was a very direct one, and she went on her own little monologue. I mean, it's one of those kind of, just heart-stopping ones. Like, I thought you were one of the good guys. And George is right. Her experience, maybe this is what it is. She has a fanatical hatred for look, she went into theater, I think, twice. Okay. So, I mean, I'm not going to judge or assume I know anything about her deployments, but it's very much out of line what she'd been saying for years. Right. So maybe to be determined, folks. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I'm not even sure, to be honest. What is she doing now? Because I mean, she's not in Congress anymore, so I don't know. Does she have a job, or
Well, probably not in the Democratic Party.
No, not in the Democratic Party, but I wonder whether maybe somebody here knows. So where is she the think tank?
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah. I'm plucking this out of the air. I wouldn't be surprised if it had something to do with some kind of veterans thing. I wouldn't be surprised.
Right. No. I think that she's always had that. I mean, she's a veteran and she's she was anti-war, but I think she was always anti-regime change wars. I mean, so she was opposed the war in Iraq, the war in Syria, the war in Libya. But I guess the issue of the jihadis. I mean, I guess it never came up before. So it's possible that she had always had that feeling that, well, we should just target jihadis. But we know when Obama was doing that, I mean, he was targeting jihadis. I mean, it was an absolute fiasco. You kill someone and then you say, well, we killed their top man. We have no idea who you killed, whether he's the top man or he was just simply the top man's chauffeur. So I don't know, these drum strikes. I mean, he seemed to be a really, really dumb idea.
Yeah, but I mean, it creates an anesthetic, doesn't it? It's just all a computer game, okay? And it's committing violence without the blood and gore. It's a very interesting mindset, and it makes it easier. It makes it easier to accept the empires. Killing fields, okay? Yes. Because it's just a drone. Exactly. It's just a drone. Okay?
That's right. Yeah. No, that's exactly right. I mean, I remember that, going back to when we talked about Yugoslavia during the 90s when they were bombing Yugoslavia, and the way CNN were presented, airstrikes on Serbia, airstrikes. So, it's not bombing, it's airstrikes. Which sounds like, just an airstrike, boom, okay. Everyone's going about their lives in a normal fashion. It was just an airstrike. So
yeah, and when the United States sends ships into the Black Sea, they're naval ships, okay? Yeah. So when Russia sends a ship to Venezuela, it's a warship.
A warship.
It's always, just George. One thing I wanted to ask you, if I can ask a question. I can't pay us money, but I'm going to ask you a question. Haven't you noticed that on Fox News they say more and more often the Biden regime? It's interesting.
I noticed that the Biden regime. Yeah, I have heard. Yeah. Yes.
And that was something you never ever heard. Okay, that was a regime is what you don't like. Okay, yes. And that's basically the Reuters AP rule.
Right. Right.
They're our enemies are a regime.
That's right.
But now I see how it's kind of like deep state. Yes. That would never ever use.
No, that's a very good point. I remember it was at the UN Security Council meeting, and I think it was Samantha Power, either her or her predecessor Susan Rice, would refer to the Putin regime or the Russian regime, and then the Russian Churkin, the Russia's representative of the Security Council, said that if you use that word regime again, I'm just going to basically walk out of here. So that's it. It's regime is a term. It's an offensive term because it suggests lack of any
legitimacy.
Yeah, that's right, legitimacy. And generally we don't really do that. I mean, of course, they always say the Assad regime. That's always the Assad regime. But we basically we refer to all the governments. It's the government in Tehran. It's the government in Damascus. They're governments. You may not like them, but they're governments.
But see, this plays into my theory, and I said this way in January 2017. Everyone plays into my theory is that the forced regime playbook that has been played out against so many countries and led by the United States. The playbook has come to America. Yeah. Now it's the regime, okay, and then the insurrection, right, and the lack of legitimacy. I mean, right, it's amazing that they've cobbled together all of the experiences: Ukraine, Yemen, Syria, Libya, Afghanistan, the dirty war against Iran, and they've just kind of come up with it. What would be the American regime change? I mean, I'm kind of quoting the Chinese here. regime change with American characteristics.
That's right. So I think Harry Smith says, I mean, I guess apropos what we're saying about the Department of Defense, I think that's very true, because it used to be in the UK, it used to be the War Ministry. You know, he was the Minister of War, which is the correct terminology. I mean, he's not a defense. I mean, there's the notion that somehow the Department of Defense, that anyone is actually doing any defending of the United States. I mean, who's threatening the United States? But you know, it's defense. You know, how much are we spending on defense this year? What defense are you doing? Whom are you defending? But yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, it's like, you know, but of course, if you told it War Minister, it's suddenly think, hey, you know, hey, do we really want to spend money for the War Ministry?
Absolutely. I mean, our lexicon is so perverted on so many levels, and particularly, I don't know, this jargon, kinetic conflict. What the?
Oh yeah, that's a good one. That's a new one. The kinetic.
Say the words. Okay.
That's it. Yeah. That's a good one. That was that came up in Woodward's book. You know, the kinetic. Yeah. That's a nice one, because it sounds really good. It sounds like physics. Oh, that reminds you, like kinetic energy. And that sounds good.
Yeah, but what it does is it desensitizes you.
Of course it does. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's kinetic. It's right. Not killing people. It's kinetic. Okay. I mean, I think it's like, is kinetic like static electricity? I mean,
right, exactly. I mean, kinetic. I mean, I remember in physics, you know, there's a difference between kinetic energy and potential energy. So potential energy means, you know, nothing is happening. Kinetic means, you know, whatever was potential now became active. So that's all it is. But it sounds okay. Oh, that's kinetic. But you remember when CNN used to do that thing of, you know, when they would have a target. You know, it looks very fancy, like you're looking at the radar screen, and then boom, you hit the target. It's very nice because you look at it and, you know, you don't really think anyone's been hurt. It's just boom. You know, it's like playing with toys. And it's very, you know, very nice. I mean, Chomsky once said about, like, you know, when you're walking on the ground, on the street, and you kill a whole bunch of insects, you know, you don't even think about it. I mean, you just kill some insects and you just move on. So much of this kind of coverage, the media is like that. They're just insects. I mean, who the hell cares? You know, one Afghan is, you know, like is replaceable by another Afghan.
Milley had a non-kinetic conversation with his counterpart. Okay.
Yes, you know, non-kinetic. It's a very, you know, very much kind of, I mean, but so much of the way, you know, events are covered is very important, the language that is used. I mean, one thing that I've talked about before is when you're writing about people that you don't like, they never say anything. They always hiss, they snarl, they sneer, they jeer, they ridicule, whereas our side, the good guys, they note, they observe, they say, they state,
they exude.
Exactly. So it's always, so right away, as you're reading the New York Times, you know, these are the bad guys. They can never say anything. They're always snarling and hissing.
Yeah, and when they do say something, under his breath.
Under his breath, exactly. That's right. Like,
I remember, because the most important, the biggest story, the story that I cut my teeth on in television was South Ossetia in August 2008, and it was amazing to me because Al Jazeera was parachuting people in, CBS, NBC, CNN. I mean, all of these people that were covering had never been there, didn't know any of the people, didn't know any language at all, okay? And Saakashvili had his little army, his little minions to tell them what's really going on.
Right.
And I can remember, I don't want to get it wrong, so I'm not going to name anything, but that when the Russian forces came in through the Raqqa tunnel to push the invading Georgian forces out, and it was noted that the Russian general snarled under the breath, under the influence of alcohol. I mean, it was like, how could you possibly know that? Okay,
right, yeah.
But it fits the stereotype.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
You know, interesting story about that. Just is a real, it's a really important side. RT started in in the fourth quarter of 2005, and we had a huge group of people, and we had a business section then. And there was a very nice woman. I'm not going to mention her name because it's not important, but she worked for us for about 2 years, and then she wanted to go do something else, and she went to work for Al Jazeera, and then she ended up going to Doha. And so the conflict starts. Of course, Russia's all at fault and everything. And here's this Russian woman from Moscow, okay? And she told me this later. She was in a news meeting, and she said, to their surprise, her management surprise, said, "You're getting the story all wrong." And she explained this is what's really happening here. And I was very happy because I saw after the first week of the conflict, things started, they started balancing out a little bit more. And it took one woman to say, what you're doing is wrong. It's not true what you're reporting. You're relying upon Georgian government officials only.
Right. Yeah. No, that's right. But I think that's a very interesting point, because in fact, that war in 2008, of course, it still has, as far as New York Times and Fiona Hill and all the rest, we're still talking about Russian aggression against Georgia. But in that case, the more accurate story came out fairly quickly. And I can't remember when the European Union came out with its report.
Yeah, there were two.
There were two reports, but I think in both reports, both were very critical of Georgia. They neither said that Russia was the aggressor. So therefore, it came out fairly soon that there was a lot more to it than that. So going back to the case of Yugoslavia, that story unfortunately has not really been it's come out. So I think that probably is something with what we were talking about, which is the internet, and it's hard to get the truth out in those days.
And in this case, RT.
Yeah, RT. Yeah. I agree.
We really, we got on the map on that one, okay? Yeah. Then Syria, and then Ukraine. And it was the Ukraine coverage, because in our Arabic coverage, which I, of course, do not speak Arabic, okay? RT made a big stir. And I can remember my colleagues over at RT Arabic, they would show me video and pictures of dumpsters and trash cans, and then say in Arabic, Al Jazeera lies, okay? And a lot of people don't know this, but during the initial phase of that dirty war against Syria, a good part of Al Jazeera's entire Beirut bureau walked. They just said, this is BS. We're not doing this, okay? Right. And RT made huge advances. And then when Ukraine came, that's when they started to really hate on us. Hate on us.
Yes. No, that's right. That's right. I think so. And then of course we had the 2016 election, and then they just went absolutely berserk. But it's very interesting because the Russians have taken a very tough stance. And so despite all of the threats that have come from the British government and from the Americans about, well, we're going to close down RT, because the Russians said, you do that, and we're just going to close down the Western media, they backed away. They backed away, because I think, they must make clear, you close down RT, no more BBC, no more Times, no more New York Times, you're gone. And so they've always backed down in the face of that.
My program was investigated repeatedly by Ofcom, okay? And I talked to a retired, he was no longer working for Ofcom, but I talked to him. He had intimate knowledge, obviously, how Ofcom works. And he was kind of giving me an insight of how they think. And I said to him, and I said, you can convey this to your friends that are currently working there. I said, look, I have a perfect solution. Ofcom doesn't like me, and it doesn't like my program. So when it comes on in the UK, just jam it, okay? And so it still goes out, okay? And you don't like it, you can jam it, okay? And then when the program is over, you can go back to whatever, documentary, whatever. And he said, no, we can't do that. I said, no, but you want to shut me down, so why don't you just jam me? Okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, he just couldn't believe that I would even suggest the idea. I said, but that's what you want to do. You want to jam me.
Yes.
So I mean, so why don't you just do it?
Right. Yeah. And now, what did Ofcom rule against you? What was the upshot of the?
Yeah, I don't want to speak out of turn here. I think a fine was in play, but I haven't heard anything about it since then. So I think if there had been a step, I would have heard about it. But that was a while back. So
right. And what was that problem that that you were taking a one-sided view? I mean, is that what it was? That
okay, I had to write up these documents, and we had some really good lawyers, and they did a really good job of kind of putting my words into lawyer words. And my position is, and it is still to this day, is that if you look at the media ecosphere, let's say on Ukraine, in the English language,
right,
it's like 98% in one direction. So why do I have to play the devil's advocate?
That's exactly right.
You hear on BBC, Al Jazeera, CNN, this, and then I say, we're going to counter it. And then my guest would plow away at it. I said, I don't understand, because those media outlets, they don't do that.
Yeah.
And so my very existence is a counter.
Yeah.
I'm not working in a vacuum. I'm reacting to media on this particular topic. It's not coming out of nowhere.
Right. Yeah. No, that I think that's the most powerful argument, because ultimately you got completely one-sided coverage on the BBC, ITV, Sky News. They're always, Russia is the villain, whatever it is. Whether it's Ukraine, the Skripals, interference in elections, or whatever, they're always the villain. But why do they get a pass? And then they're always hitting RT. I mean, yes, RT is paid for by the Russian government. It's going to put a different perspective on things. But that's the whole point. That's why we have media. We have different voices and different outlets. So how come they get punished, but everyone else, they get a pass? Okay, well, 100% anti-Russia, that's fine, no problem there.
I'll give you another example to the same person, and he had actually a transcript of my program, which they made us do, okay? They didn't do it themselves, they made us write up transcripts. And so he started reading one of my program, it was on Syria, and I said, I guess it was Obama at the time. So, the Obama administration's missile attack against Syria is a gross violation of international law. That's how I started. Mm-hmm. No ambiguity there.
Right.
And then this retired, non-current working guy at Ofcom said, well, could you say, there are some that say that the administration's attack is in a violation of international law. And I said, stop. And I said, no, it is a fact that it is illegal. Let's go. I have my computer with me. Let's go to the UN Charter right now. And if you ask any international lawyer worth his or her salt, and say, of course it's illegal. Okay. Now, just because the BBC wants to equivocate a little bit, no, I don't. This is a fact. This is the law.
Right.
Okay. And this guy, very, very nice guy, okay, just exasperated with me because every argument that he gave me, using my own words, I proved to him that I'm being sincere. I'm not doing this to score a point. I'm just saying, look, the illegality that is being committed by Western governments and in being parroted by their media. That is wrong. And that's what makes me what I am.
Right. But I think, again, why do you have to temper your words when they don't say, well, some would say that the Russian intervention in Ukraine is a violation of international law. They don't hide behind some would say. I mean, they just frankly come out with it. The Russian invasion of Ukraine, and that's it, as if this has been factually established. So, why do you have to do this kind of, some would say, and maybe others would say something else? No, I mean, he was stating exactly what I think any scholar, international law scholar would argue. And so, I mean, but again, why this ridiculous thing? You have to temper your words, they don't.
And I don't. And that's why they do everything they can to trample on my. I mean, George, it was really interesting because it was an awkward situation because I'm an American citizen living in Moscow, working for RT that is government funded. And I told them, I said, this will sound very strange to you, but I take my God-given right as an American citizen to freedom of speech. I believe in the First Amendment living abroad. Now, I'm sorry if you have a problem with that, but I can't behave and think in any other different way.
Right. So we got a super chat from Detroit Rock City. Thank you very much, Detroit. Well, it's more a comment than a question. It just says Al Jazeera is a propaganda tool of the Muslim Brotherhood. I can't say that I read Al Jazeera very much. But it certainly has been a propaganda arm. I mean, it's owned by the government of Qatar, and basically Qatar was supporting the jihadis in Syria, and Al Jazeera was happily going along with the narrative that Qatar wanted. So I mean, I think it's not an inaccurate characterization.
Yeah, I mean, Al Jazeera was, it was really interesting. I mean, before its international broadcast in English, it was highly respected and very much revered among a lot of people in the greater Middle East because it really did cut across a lot of the propaganda of those governments. But once it started getting involved, like when Syria came up, it had to choose sides. Right. And they chose the wrong side, in my opinion. The interesting thing was before all of that, I actually watched a lot of Al Jazeera in the early days. And what they did was, it seemed to me, they replicated Western foreign policy, but with one exception that made them stand out. And it was a plus for them in the long term was the Israeli-Palestine question. They really gave a microscope on it, and they showed it. This is a very nuanced story. It's not what you've been told all of your life. It's a lot different. And so they settled on that because Iran's the bad guy, Russia's the bad guy. They love to hate Russia. They love to hate Iran. Okay, yeah. And then they're just saying, we're going to take a certain carve out. This will be our issue on Palestine, but the rest of it, we agree with the Washington consensus. Right. And that's why it doesn't work. Okay.
Right. But I think that they were opposed to the U.S. invasion. I mean, going back to 2003, and you remember there was a time when the U.S. was targeting Al Jazeera. I mean,
right. That was Al Jazeera.
Their bureaus. Yeah.
It wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah, but on Syria they were absolutely ghastly, and so so that's right. There was also a question earlier, I think it was from Harry Smith, about the new Iranian president's address to the General Assembly. It was quite an impressive address, and he made the appropriate point, which is stop using sanctions in order to bully other countries. I mean, that sanctions is a form of war. The United States and the European Union are addicted to this policy. It violates innumerable resolutions of the General Assembly, violates the Charter of the United Nations to use your economic muscle in order to coerce weaker, vulnerable states. And the fact is, the Biden administration, and as much as the Trump administration, as much as the Obama administration, they are addicted to sanctions. They are addicted to inflicting suffering on unfortunate people. So I thought that was a good presentation.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But again, in the Western media ecosystem, they never talk about what sanctions actually mean, where they come from, and how they're applied. It's as if Washington has this God-given right to determine who could be sanctioned, and that's never questioned, with the exception of like the gray zone and stuff like that. Other than that, it's never questioned.
Yeah, I agree, and it's like we're talking about this, the defense secretary instead of the war secretary. People think of sanctions. Okay, well, at least you're not killing anyone. At least it's better.
But you are.
Yeah, you are exactly. And what was happening in the 90s with Iraq, with this dual use technology, you can pretty much ban anything. Hey, we need kidney dialysis machines. No, I mean, because you might be able to convert this into, take it apart and use it for your nuclear program. So no kidney dialysis machines for you.
You can make yellow cake with that.
That's it. Exactly. So whatever it was, we need water purification systems. No, that's kind of dual use. So no water purification for you. So yeah, in effect, you basically inflict, suffering on people.
But see, that's why reporting on geopolitics from these media outlets, they've created a zombieized public. Okay, because you use all of these weasel words, you never actually say what you should be saying, because they actually don't know what they're saying, because they're fed it. Okay, right. I mean, and all, you could talk about COVID, you could talk about unions, you can talk about minimum wage, you can talk about insurance. You're going to get a little bit more nuance there, a little bit. Right. But when it comes to the national security state, no, the script is pretty well established way in advance.
Yeah. That's right. I mean, we obviously know the hawks at Fox News. You remember during Russiagate, they didn't like the part about, saying, Trump colluded with Russia, but they agreed with everything else about, how terrible the Russians were. I mean, that's why Hannity keeps talking about the Russian lies, the Clinton paid for Russian lies. And so on.
Exactly.
Yeah. And this is what they say all the time. So, you had during all those Trump years, when you had MSNBC with that hysteria of, Rachel Maddow. Remember, they're going to turn off the gas, and we'll have grannies in the Midwest freezing to death as a result of Russia. That's all fine. That's MSNBC. That's on Fox. Throughout, the media echo chamber, the evil of Russia and how we're terribly vulnerable is unquestioned.
I almost look, because I watch these things in the morning. I more times than not, I almost lose my breakfast when somebody like Hannity says, "Well, the Keystone pipeline, they shut that down, but they gave Putin his pipeline as if they have anything to do with each other at all." Okay?
Nothing. I mean, it's such an extraordinary thing, because the easiest thing in the world would be to say, yeah, we should have the Keystone pipeline. Yeah, America should be energy self-sufficient. You should produce energy, and the Germans should have energy. The Europeans everybody should have energy. I mean, why is it one or the other? We have energy, but they mustn't have energy.
That's when they would say, we got to go to a commercial break.
That's it.
Because they would have no idea what you're talking about.
No, not at all. Not at all. It's like, yeah.
I'm sorry that we're on it here. The way Fox News is droning on about our sovereignty. Look, American foreign policy denies most of the world of their own sovereignty. How dare we talk about sovereignty? Yes. How dare you talk about it when you deny it to so many? There's limited sovereignty for even for your friends. There's limited sovereignty. Okay, right. It's extraordinary.
It really is. And then, so here we have energy prices, spiking everywhere, and then you think, well, probably a pretty good idea to have Nord Stream 2 coming on board. I mean, you want to have energy supply. I mean, one assumes, when a time when, if energy prices are going through the roof, you want energy being produced. No, my God, that's the last thing we want.
No, because this is Russian gas.
That's it.
It's
Yes.
different from other gas.
It's different. Yes, yes. I mean, the fact that it affects world prices. I mean, the moment any energy is available, it's going to affect the prices throughout the world. But no, that's nothing to do with that.
It boggles the mind. It's Russia manipulating the markets.
That's it.
Really, Russia wants to get its gas to market, and you people are blocking it. This is insanity. It's insanity.
It is, and exactly. So you have Russian manipulation. Right now, everybody in Europe is absolutely terrified of this winter's coming, and the energy prices are so horrific. So this is, you think, good. Now we got gas coming on from Russia. This should address the problem. Oh no, Putin is manipulating. No, Putin wants to provide this energy. Let's get moving, provide the energy, and then we can do something about the energy prices. Oh no, that's the last thing he's manipulating it. So yes, it's better not to have energy and then have people just freezing to death because they can't afford their bloody gas bills.
It's like American troops that are illegally in Syria. They're there to fight ISIS, though they haven't fought ISIS for a very long time. We have to take out the Assad regime, but they're fighting ISIS.
Yes.
We'll get back to you on that one.
That's it. That's a fascinating one because no one's ever really addressed that particular problem. We're fighting ISIS. So who else is fighting ISIS? Assad, Iran, Russia. Yes. So why you bombing Assad? Why you killing Soleimani? I mean, aren't these the people who are doing what we're supposed to be doing? No. That's it. It's an extraordinary thing. I mean, it's like, President Trump killed Soleimani and al-Baghdadi. Well, I mean, go.
It reminds me, I was when I send you articles, George, I'm usually on the Moscow Metro. Okay. And so remember I sent you that public opinion poll on views on foreign policy, people that isolationist, interventionists and all of this. And it was kind of a cute article in a way for me. And I wrote you, I said, American illiteracy, because, because the interesting thing is that people are quote unquote literate on a topic that is burning and that is partisan, okay? The evacuation of the airport, okay? But, when you have public opinion polls about Afghanistan, they contextualize it around one story.
Right.
And so how can you be possibly literate if it is only contextualized around one point in time? Right. And it sits in isolation, right. and that's why so many people are so illiterate, particularly in the United States and the West in general. Right. I mean, they like the Palestine-Israel conflict, and I just did it. It's not a conflict. One side is pulling the other. Okay, it's not see, they present it as if it's two equals, but they're not.
Right. Okay. That's right. And then when you get a little embarrassed, they say, two-state solution. And then they have no idea how this is going to come about, how how feasible any of this. All right, two-state, that's it. Okay. End of subject. Let's go get a bite to eat.
That's right. It's get a bite to eat, because let's just run out the news cycle.
Right.
That's what you want to do. You run out the news cycle, right. Like the quote unquote mowing the grass in Gaza. Get through the news cycle.
That's right. So we have a super chat from Toilet Source. Nice name. It says, "What's your take on the new Ukrainian oligarch law? As far as I'm concerned, it's a complete farce." I have to say, I mean, the idea that Ukraine is actually going to get to grips with its oligarchs is it's kind of laughable. I guess all of this is part of its campaign to show we're dealing with corruption. They've been doing that ever since 2014. In order to keep the Americans on board. We're definitely cracking down on corruption. So,
what you need to do when you read a story about the new oligarch anti-corruption crusade in Ukraine, open up another tab on your computer, go to YouTube, type in Chris Wray. I love Chris Wray. That's what they always say. Great song, okay? So have that as your background music when you're reading about this. This is obviously a propaganda ploy because they're, I mean, I like Urban. It's like, you don't clean up your act, nothing for you. Nothing on the menu for you,
Right,
okay?
right.
That's Urban's revenge, okay?
Yes,
You can't disagree with him. You can't, okay?
Yep. Yeah, no, I agree. And we have another super chat from Star Rover, and he says here, Zoom meeting hints the spot, which I don't know, not sure what that means. Keep up the great work. I understand that. Thank you very much, Star Rover.
I think hit the spot means that's exactly what the chef ordered.
Oh, is that right? Okay, that's good. And there was an interesting question just a moment ago, which I saw. Mary Kate Golden, and she asks, is all this madness towards Russia because of Kim Philby? His name is floating around the UK as a traitor. They are still hurting over what he did. I don't know. I mean, that's a long time ago. I mean, Kim Philby, it was he was an MI6. He headed counterintelligence and MI6, very senior figure in the British intelligence service. He spent time in Washington, D.C., became very friendly with James Jesus Angleton, who was a very senior figure in the CIA. And then it turned out that Philby was working for the Soviet Union all along. He defected in the early 1960s. It caused a huge distress, more in the United States than anything else, because they felt, because he was so close to Angleton, they felt that he really knew the ins and outs of the American intelligence services. And then Philby lived on for many, many years in the Soviet Union, lived in great comfort, as did all of the other defectors. But I don't know whether the current Russophobia has much to do with that, because in some ways the British were kind of fascinated by Philby. It's just one of those great stories that they don't really, he's somebody who was a kind of, he came from an upper crust family, his father was a famous figure in the homosexual, British diplomatic service. So there's been a lot of fascination with Philby. I don't think the current Russophobia has much to do with Philby, to be honest.
I think the current iteration, because I think, I've thought about this a lot and talked to a lot of people about it. I mean, you can go all the way back to the Napoleonic Wars. I mean, they have a bistro. You know what a bistro is? That's a Russian word, bistro, fast. They want fast service, okay?
That's right.
So the Russians are boorish, okay? You can go, and then you can go to the Crimea War, where we had people illustrated it. I mean, it was popularized. It was a very obvious enemy in a war that really nobody really understood why you were doing it. But anyway, they're bad guys, okay?
Right.
And then, the advent of communism, which really was an amazing overlap. So you have these barbaric people, which happen to have written the best novels of the 19th century. But anyway, some of the best classical music of the 19th century. But anyway, okay, I could go on and on about that. But then you have, this boorish, backward people with this evil ideology on top of it. So they really, really complemented each other. And then it gets back to, for people that are that have recent memory, it's with the end of the Soviet Union, is that the unipolar moment, like, well, you lost, now you have to do what we say. And that dovetails into this very toxic neoliberal ideology, and a very important part of that is a cultural element. They just won't be secular. They won't have the same views on gender, on transgenderism and equity and all of that. And the Russians are saying, I need a translator. What are you talking about?
That's right. Okay?
And also to put a cherry on the top is that it's a country that can say, no.
That's right. No, I think that's a very good point. It's an interesting combination, because I think they object to all of that they they're kind of openly celebrate their religious heritage, I mean, they rebuilt that church, the Church of Christ the Savior, which was one of the most, again, an example of Bolshevik barbarism, that they destroyed it, to build the palace of the Soviets, which they never actually even built. But then they replaced it with a swimming pool. But they built it, rebuilt it exactly as it was. So, there were every single part of it. And so, it's very much kind of a traditional society. But there's another aspect to it, which also the West dislikes, which is they haven't turned their back entirely on the Soviet era. I mean, they do talk positively about aspects of the Soviet tradition. So, well, obviously, the World War II, the performance in World War II that they celebrate. But again, the education system. I mean, they thought this was a very good education system. The space program. The fact that they were able to rival the United States as a military power, and that took some doing for them to get there. After within 50 years, they were able to be the equal of the United States, that strategic parity. So they said they achieved a great deal. I mean, obviously they failed in many other areas, but I think the fact that they don't say, "Oh, end of history, we failed completely," and the more kind of traditional thing, it's both of these kind of really annoy Western observers.
Look, the Bolsheviks were barbaric people with a barbaric ideology, okay? But at the end of the day, they inherited a civilization that was barely literate. By the end of it, 100% literacy, okay? Women could vote in the Soviet Union before they did in the United States, okay? There's many of these examples here. My attitude is, see, it's a very good question, because if you, in the center of Moscow is the foreign ministry, and it's a big Stalin building and massive, okay?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
And they have refurbished it since I've lived here, and they've built an annex also. But at the very, very top, they still have the hammer and sickle. And I often think about that, okay? I often think about that. At Tabarskaya Metro, which is in the southern part of the city on the ring, on the metro ring, massive Lenin Lenin statue, still there. And I think about that, okay? And but what I think is, and it goes back to Fiona Hill saying,
yeah, exactly. I was thinking of Fiona Hill as well.
Yeah, but her article that George and I did a separate video on is that there's a fundamental misunderstanding of. There's a difference between reviving and worshiping the Soviet experiit. The difference, and there, on the other hand, is acknowledging that it's part of your history. You have to acknowledge it. You can't cut it out. This is not like Black Lives Matter. If we get rid of those statues, then it's all taken care of. No, nothing's taken care of. All right.
I agree with you, and I think that it is striking that, and this is the point that the late Stephen Cohen made, which is that all the talk about Putin trying to rehabilitate Stalin. It was Putin who had that memorial to the victims of Stalin built. He did it. Wasn't Khrushchev, wasn't Gorbachev, wasn't Yeltsin. It was Putin who built that memorial. And he said, Putin, when he unveiled the memorial, is that these are crimes that can never be forgiven. So, it's a complex view of history, but that doesn't mean we're taking down all the statues. Doesn't mean that we don't also acknowledge that Stalin was an outstanding world wartime leader. So it's a complex view of history rather than, well, let's just take down the statues and then everything will be great.
Well, and also, I mean, what are you going? I mean, this is something that I thought about when my first couple of years living here. I've been here 21 years. Is that, what right does an outsider coming to Russia, let's say in 2001, and say, "How dare you carry a poster of Stalin?" I mean, what business is of yours?
Yeah,
that is a seminal part of an elderly person's life, for better or worse. All of them have their own private experience. When, I mean, if you look at someone, let's say in year 2000, that's 70 years old, they probably will tell you that their great grandfather walked to church with no shoes and only could read from scripture. I mean,
Right.
that was the alpha and the omega of it. And then that person in 2000 is a PhD in physics.
Right,
Okay,
right.
are you going to tell them that the entire experience
Yes.
it was negative? No,
Right.
there terrible things happen. That's why we study history, folks. We don't study to feel good. We study to try to understand what went wrong.
Right, right. No, that's exactly the point. And so when Fiona Hill, she kind of likened Putin to Trump, or Trump to Putin, whichever. She said, "Oh yeah, Trump doesn't want to take down the Confederate statues and doesn't want to rename the military bases that are named after Confederate general, and that's like Putin, who doesn't want to take down Bolshevik memorial." Yeah, that's exactly right, because they both, say history is what it is. I mean, it's, the Confederacy, the Civil War is a part of American history. You note it. Doesn't mean anyone goes around you're worshiping because you see a statue of Robert E. Lee. So, that's it. Let's get the Confederacy moving again. Let's bring slavery back. No one thinks that. It's a part of commemorating your history, how you have arrived to where you are now. So that's it. I mean, the idea that you could just because that is barbarism. That is what Fiona Hill and the others suggest is the kind of barbarism that the Bolsheviks practice. Let's just destroy all this statue. Let's destroy everything. It's not just history. We'll start all over again. Same with the Taliban. History. Let's just destroy it. That's barbarism.
It's very easy, and it's very lazy, just to focus on Stalin. Okay, and we could George and I could spend the rest of our lives discussing his life. Okay, it's a world historic. Okay, but look at what happened in the 1920s, the first real bloodbath, the Civil War.
Right.
What has happened over the last 20 years? That there's a recognition of the white generals, they were against the Bolsheviks. There was a recognition that they fought for a vision of Russia that was different from the Bolsheviks. But it is worth remembering, and it's worth honoring as well. And that we've seen statues of them come up. Okay. Yeah. And then again, what Western media, these lazy asses, there's no law. Be careful. You can build your own statues if you want. People can build a statue who they like. And I'll give you a quick one. What's the guy? What's his first name? Cook over at Apple.
Oh, Tim Cook.
Okay. And so somebody in St. Petersburg built a little monument to him. And then they heard that he was gay. They destroyed it. It was a private monument, private, okay? Mm-hmm. Private initiative. Yeah. And then, like Putin is fighting against the gay community. That was a personal endeavor. I had nothing to do with the government whatsoever. You see how the laziness of the mind of these people? It was a private thing. Okay.
And the same goes, incidentally, for when they talk about statues of Stalin. When they say, "Oh, they're putting up statues of Stalin," as if Putin is putting up statues. No, the few statues they refer to are private things. People put it in their own private garden. Well, you can't stop them. I mean, somebody wants to put up a statue of Stalin in his own private garden. He can do so. But the media present it as if, statues are going up in the Soviet Union. Putin wants statues of Stalin.
Look. To kind of just put closure on this here. Most people that remember the Soviet Union, that lived through it, have good feelings about it. Okay, right. They do. Right. That was their motherland.
Right.
Okay, right. And then what you can get people's blood boiling about is how it ended. That gets people angry. Okay,
and rightly, because they say, once there was a country. We had a great country once. It was a 15 republic federation, and it's gone. And it was just frittered away. I mean, so a lot of suffering had gone into creating this great power, and it was just gone overnight. Kind of over a boozy dinner. You just lost it all. So people get very upset about that.
The oddity for me, when I read reports in Western media about that, is that they're obsessed with these things. People here are not obsessed about it. People just simply don't talk about it. I've said before, I think I've said it before here on the Gaggle, the word Stalin is used as an adjective, a Stalin building, because they were big, okay? Right. And it's prestigious to live in them, irrespective of your political coloration or your opinions about anything. So I live at Krasna Vorota, Red Gate. Oh, that's a cool building, okay? Right. I lived there when I first moved here. I lived there, like on the 14th floor. You feel like, yeah, this is an impregnable place. This is power. And that's what it was designed for.
Well, it was designed for that. And he kind of, whatever else you say about him, he kind of energized people. I mean, it's, but people had a certain enthusiasm. I mean, you can, if you just watch Soviet movies, after Stalin, or this is in the 1960s, you still kind of convey an idealism. Now, we can all criticize the idealism, but Stalin did inspire that, hey, we are creating something, this is all part of some great goal. And we can mock it now and say something, but he did inspire people. These buildings, they're very impressive. I mean, you can look at it and say that's a Stalinist monstrosity, that foreign ministry, but it's quite impressive when you look at it.
A little tidbit for everybody. These the soldiers that were taken in captivity from Stalingrad, many of them, some of them, were actually educated architects. And they were used as prisoners of war to build the Stalin buildings in Moscow. So, and many of them were German architects. So, I mean, they very interesting, derivative part of history here. I don't know, George, how much was that? Over 200,000, almost 300,000 that were taken in captivity, and something like 15,000 ended up going home. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's right.
But and just we say it all the time, but it's always important to reiterate is that the way they treat history in the West, I mean, people can barely get basic dates right, basic ones. Okay. Good. People here are well educated, and they all know what 1941 to 1945 was all about. Okay, and it's still with them to this day. It's part of their genetic code.
That's right. But that's the interesting thing, because for all of that they just about everybody had a relative. Well, either they were killed in the war, or they had a relative who was shot by Stalin or died in exile because of Stalin and so on. But nonetheless, there was still a respect for Stalin that prevailed in the Soviet Union. I mean, remember when he died, there were millions of people who went through that procession. I mean, they
were trampled.
They were trampled, exactly. They were trampled. I mean, this was a huge thing. This is a spontaneous thing that no one forced people to go and see his lying in state. That was because, to the contrary, the Soviet leaders, they kind of wanted to wrap this up very quickly. I mean, they wanted him bundled out of the way. This is long before Khrushchev's famous secret speech. They already were shoving Stalin out of the way, out of the picture.
The interesting thing too is that with the quote unquote de-Stalinization under Khrushchev, I mean, here was the most important political figure in the country for a very, very long time, and he suddenly disappeared, but not from the consciousness of people. Okay?
Exactly right. Exactly.
He was disappeared. See, and this showed the hypocrisy of the Soviet regime in that respect. They just wiped you out. But tens of millions of people had an intimate reference point with Stalin and the war, and you can't take that away from people.
No, you can't. Yeah, but what you said is very true, because my father, he had the copy of Pravda the day after Stalin died. Big headline, and so on. The very next day, the next issue, Stalin was mentioned below the fold. Right below the fold. The day after that, boom, he's already vanished from Pravda. So that was they moved quickly, tried to eradicate Stalin from history. But as you say, it was stupid, because he had, the man, he had, been in charge 25 years, probably even more. I mean, by the time he was already at the top, 25 years. The idea that you can just sort of wipe it out by just simply ignoring him or denouncing him.
He was dead.
Yeah.
It wasn't like he was hovering around.
Right. Yeah. But you're right. I mean, he was intimately involved, not just in the war, but as just about everybody was in some ways a victim of the Stalinist purges. So everyone just sort of, I lost my father, I lost my grandfather, and so on. But even so, there was some sort of a bond that was forged with Stalin.
And it as a foreigner living here, and when it's brought up, because it's only crazy foreigners like me that want to talk about these things. And I find a few people that are like, I mean, Dima Babic, our good close friend here, such a wealth of information comes from him because he has great historic knowledge. And Dima's first education was literature. So that really adds to it, because that's part and parcel of Russian consciousness is through their literature. It's so intimately connected.
Right.
And he tells me these stories about his family, about people that he knew growing up and all that. I mean, it shows that it's a very, very thick, complex fabric, and you can't separate anything from anything.
Right. No, that's right, and that's why I think, because Putin has, I think, a complex attitude toward history and to the reality of Russia. This infuriates Westerners. And again, to quote the late Stephen Cohen, I mean, he said that Putin has never instructed anyone to take any particular line on history. He says, here are the archives. Go to the archives and then write your history. You interpret history. I'm not giving you how you should interpret it. And so and I think that's his own view. Look, it is what it is. I mean, we are here. We are the product of the Soviet era. We're a product of World War I, World War II. Make of it what you will.
Yes, and anyone in the West demanding that Russians today apologize to the Soviet Union. Well, you know where you can shove that.
Right.
Okay?
Exactly.
Okay?
That's right.
I mean, it's up for them to deal with their history. Okay. And I think they are. I think they do. And I think there's nothing forbidden about talking about Russian history, guys. There's nothing forbidden to talk about.
Exactly. I think that's what's. And again, the media are presented in a wholly mischievous and misleading ways. That somehow, Russians are not permitted to take a critical attitude towards their past. The Putin regime is preventing. Is that and again, no. He just says, here are the archives. They're all open. Make of it what you will.
There was a story, it was the early days of our team. And I remember one of the producers, his name was Szamuely. And there was a news story, in Russia, you can't publish a biography on Stalin, this is the re-Stalinization of Russia and closing of the public sphere. And my friend Szamuely, his sister, worked in the publishing house that said they didn't want to publish the book because there are already too many books out there. Nobody wants to buy them, okay? Because there's so many biographies about the guy. There's no market demand. We're not going to publish. We're not going to lose money on it.
Yeah.
Again, that's the other.
That's a very good point.
That's the backstory. I could talk here for hours about the backstory that nobody looked into.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm sure that's right. It's like it's such an exhausted topic. It's like there's no market for it. We're all fascinated by all of this, but Russians aren't. I mean, they've got other things on their mind.
Why are we fascinated with it? Because it's ghoulish and it reinforces a stereotype that you have about these people. Right. Okay, you're taking a very, very intense, tragic part of history, and you're extrapolating backwards and forwards and way into the future forever. That's ahistorical thinking. Okay, but they're addicted to it because it reinforces the worst possible ideas about what Russia's about, what their people are about.
Right. Yeah. No. That's exactly right. But they need to demonize it, and so it's it's an important part of it. So the demonization. So we have a comment again from Toilet Source. He says Saakashvili arrested upon returning to Georgia. So LOL.
Was he
So,
arrested? He was arrested.
yeah, he was arrested. Yes. Why would he return to Georgia? Because he always knew he would be arrested. So
nobody else wants him.
No, but it was a kind of a strange thing for him to do to return to
Remember
Georgia.
This?
Yeah. But imagine, this was a guy that when what's her name, Condoleezza Rice, she visits him in 2008 and gives him 2 thumbs up, go ahead, mount your attack on South Ossetia. I mean, this guy's a nutcase. Imagine making such a stupid judgment and saying, hey, yeah, you go ahead, do what you want to do. It's like without thinking anything through the consequence. And Condoleezza Rice, she's supposed to be an expert, a PhD was something to do with the Soviet Union. So that's Condoleezza Rice.
Something to do with the Soviet Union.
Yeah. So
she was a quote unquote arms control expert. She was not a Russia expert. Okay.
Right. Yeah, I can't remember what was her dissertation on. Wasn't something to do with, I think, like Soviet disarmament in Germany, something like that. Yeah, that's right. But
it's not, what a sad sack of,
That's
really.
right. But again, she had things going for her, and then she was just, vaulted from one big job to another. It's like, not a mediocrity, but right away, national security advisor, secretary of state. She was the provost at Stanford University. I think she's now the director of the Hoover Institution.
I always forget the guy's name. Who was Colin Powell's chief of staff? I can't.
Oh, I know. It's not Lieberman. Is it Silberman or Wilkerson? Wilkerson. Yeah.
Okay, you guys. Go to the gray zone. I think it was Aaron Mate interviewed him, and he has some choice words about Condoleezza Rice. Okay,
right,
and the other crazies in the Bush.
Right. But Colin Powell is in other cases, incidentally, where always elevated. Well, one minute he's the national security advisor, then he's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, then he's defense secretary, then he's the secretary of state. It was like you got to go from one big job to another. Totally, in mediocrity. And unlike other cases, he really fell flat on his face. He had and he will forever be remembered at that presentation at the UN Security Council. Exactly. He will never be able to eradicate that. So, other people fail upwards, and he obviously failed upwards, but they've got him with that picture.
Yeah, well, it was Saakashvili. See, guys, you want to hook your train to these crazy people? This is what happens. You end up freaking homeless. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Really? Yeah. You end up being homeless, stateless. You throw in with these people that they only use you for their very limited purpose, and then they get rid of you. How's Guaido doing in his mother's basement, folks?
Right. Okay. Right. No, and here we have, and again, Toilet Sauce, another super chat. Thank you very much. Apropos of Saakashvili, he says, I guess he saw the success of Navalny had when he returned to Russia. Yeah, Navalny is another case. I mean, they pretty much, I think, laid it on the line for him, which is that, hey, you can stay here in the West, but then you'll just be an irrelevant figure. We're just going to lose interest in you. So if you want us to continue to be interested in you, you better go back. Even because I'm not sure Navalny really wanted to go back, but I think he was laid down the line for him.
Yeah, and then he's going into a gulag and all of this.
Yeah.
And then they find out that he's basically in Lompoc. There's a vending machine that he's talking, and they make him watch Soviet war films, which aren't that bad actually. Okay, my money is on this. They're looking for a pretty young woman in St. Petersburg to take over the mantle. Okay.
Oh, I think so. I think that was it, and that's I think the reason why he went back, because I think that if he wasn't, then he would just simply very quickly kind of, everyone would lose interest in him, and that there would be some new, as you say, a pretty woman. And I think there is, I forgot her name, who's the sort of the who appeared to be the designated leader of the Russian opposition. Again, very pretty young girl, the sort of the Russian equivalent of Tikhanovskaya. Always easy on the eye. That's why I think Navalny had to go back.
If he stayed, he'd probably be a junior fellow at the Hoover.
Right, yeah, but those things are a little tricky because there's always shortage of money, and after all, if you have no future in Russia, then they're kind of gonna, what's the use? Why do we pay you a salary? There's no value added in paying him a salary if he doesn't have any prospects in Russia. So it's always, he himself, he has a kind of, he's kind of a good-looking guy, so again, telegenic. But I think that's what the Western paymasters want. They want someone who looks good. Guaido, in other case, you want to look good, very presentable for Western media audiences.
Yeah. And it comes over and over and over again. They find these people, and they're their people. They may have some connection to the country that they reside in, but they're designated from the outside. And Navalny really overplayed his hand, okay? Because even people that do not like Putin would say, well, Navalny's obviously working for them. Okay, everybody knows that. Okay,
that's right.
You can say I know that and still dislike Putin. What are these people, at the Hoover Institute thinking that people can't walk and chew gum at the same time?
Right.
Again, it's so insulting that the people the country you hate, the people you hate, they have no agency. Okay, of course they do.
Mm-hmm. Right. Darren Alivi, another super chat. Thank you very much, Darren. He says the name that I was thinking of is the Russian Ksenia Sobchak. Will probably
she's already passé. She's already.
You're right. That wasn't the one I was thinking of. There was somebody else. You remember who was? I think she was arrested and released. Yeah, but you're right. No, Sobchak is not the. Her time has come and gone. But yeah, that's the type of person, and but you ultimately have to have some kind of a you have to have an in there. And now, with Navalny being back, he's in prison. Well, the New York Times can then write about him, and then we can once again run these stories: the real leader of the opposition, the real leader of Russia, and so on. But while you're hanging around, living in comfort in Germany, you kind of become irrelevant. Or if he becomes a research fellow at the Hoover Institution, there's no real value added to that. So you have to have somebody who is there. But I know, look at Guaido. Guaido is now gone. That's
got all that gold though.
Yeah, I got all that gold, but ultimately, your moment has come and gone. So anyway, all right, Peter, you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I got to take my dogs out because they're getting really rowdy here. Buddy, you want to say hi to everybody? Come on, bud. Oh, okay. All right. This is a super chat. We're not going to talk about the tip jar. Don't worry. Okay.
No. Yes, this is super chat. Yes. Super. All right, buddy. Are you getting rowdy and resting?
Oh, it's all right, bud.
All right, boy. He's
a little feisty right now.
He's in a mood. All right, Peter. Well, thank you very much for all of your questions. Thank you for joining us. It's always great to talk to fellow gagglers, and really appreciate those with the super chatters. Love your generosity, and we intend to be here same time next Friday.
As long as the welcome mat is out.
Exactly. We made a commitment, and as long as YouTube keeps us on, we will be here.
Because you're our date for Friday night.
You're our date for Friday night. So thank you so much, everybody. And see you next Friday. Okay. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.